My friend's apartment has been haunted for a long time, with voices, toilet flushing, and a strange feeling. Thank you for your subscription and likes. What would you do if it were you? You can leave your thoughts in the comments section. These homes are also known as accident properties. These properties can be rented or purchased at very low prices, provided you are okay with the history of the home or the apartment. There are a growing number of individuals and companies that specialize in purchasing these stigmatized properties at huge discounts, and they either rent them out or resell them in the future. In the case of a house, the house may be demolished and the land may be resold. Under the real estate transaction law, the real estate license holders have a legal obligation to inform the tenant or buyer of any known natural deaths that occurred in the property. The details of the accident must be also explained prior to the signing of the lease or contract. If the seller, landlord, or real estate agent intentionally omits this information from the rental or purchase contract, the contract may be nullified, and there have even been court cases where the contract has been voided. But before renting a jukin, let's look at the pros and cons. The pros are these types of properties can be rented or bought at a very cheap price. The discount will be greatest for properties that were the scene of a violent crime or incident, and these properties may sell for less than a quarter of the market price. The cons: such properties may not be advisable for those who are concerned about uninvited guests or believe in the supernatural, or for those looking for properties that would be easy to resell or rent out in the future. But how do you find out if your property has a history? Well, the easiest and fastest ways to ask the real estate agent. You should try asking the building's management company. You can also check the popular OIMA2 website. That's www.oimalandco.jp. But please be advised that this site is not official and does not cover every property and every incident. So I want to give you a very quick example before we get into the scary stories. I chose an area that I used to live in, and I want to show you what it looks like when I pull up the website. So here's the mall I used to go to all the time. It is a supermarket, a food court, and a cinema, just really everything you need. As you can see, there's a flame mark here, and that indicates that an unnatural death occurred here. So let's find out what happened so straight away. By reading the first line, you can find out that someone sadly jumped off the top of the multi-level car park. And in situations like this, my thoughts always go out to the poor man's friends and family. We also have a comment to examine here, and it goes a little deeper into detail. But first I want to show you the car parking area, because the position of the flame doesn't really line up with the true area that the occurred. It's a little towards the back, and it's in a bit of a darker area. Here it is. I would just give you a brief rundown of the comment that I found here as well. So the man in question was a 24-year-old teacher. He was suspected of some sort of road incident, drunk driving maybe, and the following day was his final day. Apparently he left a note, but I'm not sure of the contents, but I can imagine what a shame. The pressure and the stigmatism of his violation on the road, potentially affecting his work and social life, probably motivated its fatal choice. According to the comment, of course, but I hope at this point we are now accustomed to what a GCO is. Here's another example, just a little up the street from the mall. There was a fire here clearly, and unfortunately some people died, and therefore this has become a home or an area with a history. A famous example in cinema perhaps is The Ring or The Grudge, if you've ever heard of those movies and kind of get a flavor of a home with a history. You know. So with no further ado, let's dive into some true disturbing homes with histories, aka BIN, aka accident properties stories. I will be cutting in now and then to explain things where possible, and I really hope it doesn't disrupt the pace of the stories. But anyway, please can you do me a massive favor and drop a comment, share the video, or subscribe. I used to work as a real estate consultant for a real estate company. I would help clients build their profiles in terms of asset ownership. I remember it was a hot summer's day when this took place, an August afternoon. I got a call and I was told that there was someone who was interested in purchasing one of our properties. I met with the client. We discussed potential options. After listening to some of the conditions that were requested, I proposed an apartment that we had on our books. The property was in Cha Prefecture, and when I showed the client some images, I saw his face light up. He loved the place. He didn't hide his excitement. I thanked him and I offered him a viewing of the property, and off we went. I was thinking that I might be making a sale, but then something dawned on me. I had forgotten to mention something about the property. If I failed to tell him about it, then there would be hell to pay. so I came out with it. I said sorry, but there's something that I simply must mention to you before you consider purchasing this property. It's got a history. Someone passed away in there and not through natural causes. I was naturally reluctant to broach the subject with the customer after he had been so positive about the place, but I had to mention it. I was duty-bound, so I had no choice. He looked shocked and I could see him mentally weighing up his options. And then he finally said, "Can I still take a look at it? I'm not that worried about its history." I felt relief instantly wash over me, and then we set off. I was a little surprised by his reaction. He didn't really see any problem with owning a home with a history, but I had done my part. I had given him fair warning, so I was happy to continue. I guess that he understood the risks on the car ride. I tried to reassure him as best I could, just in case he was considering second-guessing it, even though it's a home of a history. I would like to assure you that the place has been thoroughly cleaned. There was just one death, and it was in one of the spacious rooms, and if I didn't tell you, I doubt you would have suspected which room. What I mean by that is there are no odors. In fact, the room where the unpleasantness occurred could be considered the best-looking and cleanest room of all. We chatted about the property on the ride over. I was trying my best to disperse any doubt or concerns that he might have. He looked at ease to me. I knew that what I was telling him was true, because I had visited the property myself earlier in the year. I think it was winter and it was in great condition. It had been renovated and deep cleaned. It was hard to believe that someone actually died in there. When we arrived, it was difficult to find parking. I thought that it would be best to drop the client off and ask him to wait a few moments, while I looked for a spot to park. I unlocked the apartment so that he could have an opportunity to look around uninterrupted. I had to park a few streets away in a pay-and-display parking lot. It was frustrating. As soon as I parked, I hurried back to the apartment building. I guess that it was because it was a national holiday that day. Well, all week, to be honest, it was Obon. Hi Jay. Here Obon is an annual Buddhist event for commemorating one's ancestors. It is believed that each year during Obon the ancestor spirits return to this world in order to visit their relatives. Obon is mainly observed from August 13th to 16th. The Obon week in mid-August is one of Japan's 3 major holiday seasons. Back to the story. When I finally came back to the building and raced up the stairs, I found the client waiting outside of the front door. It looked to me like he was acting a little strange. "Why are you waiting out here?" I wondered. As I approached him, I decided to open the door for him, and I caught a glimpse of the inside of the apartment, and something didn't look like it did. The last time I was in there, I immediately knew that something was wrong. It was the living room. There was something on the floor. There were these large black water-looking marks on the hardwood floor. These black stains created the outline of a human silhouette. It looked like there was an outline of an outstretched arm reaching towards the kitchen area too. The beautiful white hardwood floor had this sinister-looking stain right in the middle of it. What's more, the room was seemingly filled with a putrid odor, like something not too dissimilar to rotten eggs. I couldn't understand it. I had been here before, and there was nothing of the sort on my last visit back in winter. It just made no sense to me. We had put so much money into cleaning this home. I knew that those stains couldn't or shouldn't be there, but yet they were. It was one of those moments that my mind brought up a cliché that I had heard of before, yet failed to fully understand that cliché was. I couldn't believe my eyes. Those traces on the floor that formed the outline of a person looked fairly fresh, almost like a watermark on a coffee table or something. It was a hot one, a real hot August afternoon. Yet somehow when I laid eyes on those stains I couldn't help but sweat more. I was sweating buckets. I felt so hot. Then I heard the prospective property owner say from behind the safety of the door I had opened, "You said it was a home with a history, but I didn't expect this. Would you mind telling me how the former resident passed away?" I found myself a little embarrassed, as I didn't know how the former resident died. I hadn't taken an interest, I guess, in the pursuit of making a sale and generating wealth. I had forgotten about showing a little humanity, a little respect. As you might expect, the client didn't buy the property. I mean, who would? After seeing that later, I heard from someone at the real estate company I worked for more about the fate of the former resident. It was an elderly resident, and I'm told that the body was found on a hot day in summer August actually, where the sun burned down relentlessly. The body was found in the living room. The cause of death was thought to be heat, exhaustion, extreme thirst and dehydration. Hi Jay, here I'll just leave you with a thought. Obon is a very special time of year in Japan, where it is said that spirits are closest to our plane of existence. Hi Jay here. Before we start, I want to give you a little warning. This account is a bit different to a ghost story. It's a little harsh in areas, so it might shock, because it reveals the true reality of these situations. The way it's written is a little unusual too. It jumps around quite a bit from point to point, but as always I try to keep things as authentic as I can when translating these stories. So I've chosen to keep the way it was written. The way it was written. I have built a career on selling remodeled homes with histories, apartments, condominiums, houses, villas, etc. I have also been the person who was first to find the bodies in these homes, since the neighbors would report to my company that they hadn't seen the tenant for a while or complain of strange smells coming from the home. In my experience, the overwhelming majority of bodies I have discovered have been ones who took their own lives. The usual method is hanging. I have noticed that the younger people who do that pick a spot in the home which is strong enough to support them, like a central pillar, for example. I think they do this because they are concerned about the damage to the building after the fact. Surprisingly, the home is left clean too, especially the rooms that they choose to do it in. But then again, there are other cases. An elderly man severed his caught artery in his neck with a kitchen knife. He covered himself with his blanket, then did it, but it was still very messy. There was blood all over the walls and the floor. A lot had to be replaced and repainted. I worked really hard on that one, and honestly, if I showed you around that property, you'd have no idea that something like that ever happened in there. I think in that place a family moved in for a while after that, but then it was demolished. The building was very old and it just didn't make much sense to keep it going. From my perspective, it's always better to know when we are working on an accident property rather than when we aren't. We don't always find the bodies. We just usually go there to get the place clean and livable. I prefer to know what happened in there. But sometimes we aren't told, or the owners of the buildings are vague and deliberately ambiguous. On other times we're just told to get in there and clean it without any explanation. I guess you guys are interested in ghost stories and stuff like that, right? Well, I'll share a couple of things with you. I once went to renovate a villa by the sea. The previous owner hung himself from the stairwell between the first and second floor. The bereaved family asked me if I could sell the place in secret, not to disclose what happened there, so that they could mourn in peace. I guess of course this isn't the best practice. We usually have to disclose this. But hey, I'm an executive and I didn't get where I am without cutting a few corners. I told some of my team, but only the essential personnel. The renovation work continued late into the evening, and the person who was working on the stairwell between the first and second floor, the balcony SL atrium area, he came to me and he said that he felt like something wasn't right about this property. He said that while he was working on his ladder, he felt like his left leg was being pulled from below. He was one of the ones I didn't tell about the villa's history. Strange, right, to be honest. I was getting bad vibes from the villa and I didn't want to be there any longer than I had to. We had to get the job done, though about 2 days later that worker developed a high fever and he was having difficulties breathing, so he had to be rushed to the hospital. He was in a serious condition and the doctors were baffled. The hospital offered to subsidize the treatment costs in exchange for the data that they would discover by treating him. Thankfully, he made a full recovery, and I'm really glad he did. The reality of these homes with histories is that they leave behind a great deal of trouble for those who have to clean it up and for the families who have to live with it, not to mention the people who move in after. I have thought about it quite a bit over the years. I guess their fatal choices are motivated by financial issues, or, if not that, then I like to say some version of PTSD or loneliness. Let me tell you a little bit about discovering a body and what it's like. First of all, the smell of human decomposition is disgusting. The flies that come with it are just as bad to me. The soullessness of them buzzing around and doing as they know only how to do is quite chilling to me. Then you get the family members who were owed money, perhaps by the departed, and if they encounter you in that home, well, you're just a target for their rage and, in some cases, their grief. We encounter people who have chosen to end things by themselves and people who have succumbed to natural causes and have gone unnoticed. The easier to dispose of the two is those who ended things their way. Hangings are always nice. Well, not nice. I guess that's bad to say, but less work if we discover a hanging or even a body in a bath. Use your imagination here. It's easier to dispose of and we can get the place cleaned and sold pretty quickly before we can do much work. The deceased is examined by the police and the doctor. If we're lucky, we can get in there before the police come and even do some stain prevention, which is great. Sometimes if the bodies are discovered early, then paramedics come to attempt resuscitation, but I haven't seen that. I've only heard of that. When it comes to dying alone, there is a great deal of difference between summer and winter. In summer, if 2 weeks go by and the body is undiscovered, then the smell and the amount of bugs are beyond belief. That's why you need a specialized team to get in there and deodorize and replace the flooring. In some cases, you need someone to treat the foundations beneath the floor. My worst experience was when I had to call the foundation guy back for treatment twice. You can imagine the smell. I guess a week after death is a bit different. If there is reinforced concrete down there, you may not need the foundation to be treated at all. The while our work is ongoing, we have pressures on us to get the job done as soon as possible. There isn't much time to be shocked or work with respect for the dead. In all honesty, we leave the respect part to the families. So you have to learn to work without emotions governing you. I'm sometimes asked what is the longest period of time a body has gone undiscovered. And for me personally, it was 6 months. The body was in a mummified state. The smells were awful. Not just the body. There was rotten garbage, food, feces, you name it. We cleaned and cleaned, but you could never really get rid of that smell. So a decision was made to demolish and sell the land, and it's now an apartment block. The vast majority of people who die alone and are left undiscovered are male, older men who are single. I'm sure you have heard some stories of ghostly experiences and stuff like that, but I think not enough is said about what to expect other than the paranormal. If you move into a home with a history is exactly what it means. Let me explain. As I mentioned before, those who choose to end things on their own terms are usually motivated to do so through financial difficulties. In short, they owe money and their debts are insurmountable. These debt collectors will likely come looking for what they are owed at some point. You'll probably get a lot of threatening letters too. And maybe someone who has owed money doesn't know that a new person has moved in. Things could even get a little violent. Finally, I'll give you a piece of advice. If you are thinking of living in one of these homes with a history because they're cheap, it can be a great option as long as you know the risks. Go around the area after you've shown the property and ask the locals. Go to the coffee shops, the convenience stores, and ask questions because you might just get a couple of answers. People with no vested interest in the property will probably tell you what went down in there, even if the real estate agent won't be careful out there. This happened when I started living alone for the first time. I was as excited as I was nervous. I think it's always hard when you start out on your own right. I was looking for a place where the rent would be cheap, somewhere not too far from the state and somewhere relatively new. I didn't know at the time, because I was young and naive, that the strict requirements that I wanted to be met were pretty difficult. I was advised by a letting agent that if I wanted to rent somewhere in my price range, then I could only do that if I gave up at least one of the conditions that I wanted. I reluctantly agreed and decided to view flats in buildings which were at least 10 years old. I wasn't really ecstatic when I went with the age to view the first place she suggested, but I have to say when I got there and she opened up the door, I was pleasantly surprised. It was nothing like I imagined it would be. I expected someplace half dilapidated again. Excuse my naivety at the time, but I found the flat that I was being shown surprisingly beautiful. There was one thing that struck me almost instantly about the place, though it gave off kind of a weird smell. It was like walking into a place that had been sealed shut for a while. It felt almost damp and lifeless. I got the vibe that no one had lived there for a long while. I looked over the place and I felt my smile widening as I mentally checked off all the things that I wanted in my new home. When I heard the price, I could barely contain my excitement. I don't know if it was the saleswoman or my own impulsivity, but I felt if I didn't act quickly would lose this place. It had big windows that allowed the sun in. It had a great storage system and deep walk-in wardrobes, so it was perfect. I couldn't risk losing this place, so I decided to contract with the letting agency and lock it in. I moved in and I was so excited to start my new life. The big windows allowed so much sunshine in throughout the day. It was truly gorgeous, but at nighttime I couldn't help but feel a little spooked out and therefore jumpy. I put it down to nerves. You know, new home jitters. I just took a drink in the evening to calm my nerves, and then I was able to get off to sleep without any issue. But that restless and jittery sensation wouldn't let up, no matter how many nights passed. I mean, initially I thought it was down to my caffeine intake, so I cut that back, but that didn't make any difference. It just made the next working morning even harder because I was used to the drink to get me to sleep one night. I was doing my usual routine and I found myself drifting off to sleep, only to wake up at some point in the night to hear a noise coming from somewhere in my new home. What the hell is this? I thought, probably out loud. I tried to get up or twist my neck to face the direction of the sound, but I found that I was completely incapable of movement. I was like a slab of stone in my bed, motionless. I was suffering from sleep paralysis. I had experienced something like that before, so I didn't panic as much as I probably should have. I just relied on darting my eyes all over to try and find out what was happening. I judged that the noises I was hearing was coming from within the bathroom. The noise slowly sounded more familiar the more awake I became to me. It sounded like water dripping. Did I forget to turn the shower off or the tap? I wondered. I knew that was like me. I never been a careless person and I believe in a neat and tidy home, so I don't think I would have forgotten to turn off the tap or the shower. But I know we're all human and mistakes can happen. Just in case it was my carelessness, I tried to rise from my bed once again. I was struggling with whatever was keeping me on my bed, when I heard something strange, the sound of water dripping. The sound that I had heard so clearly coming from the bathroom seemed now to be approaching. It sounded like the dripping water was getting closer. I felt as if there was something in my home with me. I knew that I wasn't alone. There was something in my home and it was getting closer and closer to me. At that point I still couldn't move. I felt as if my heart was pounding faster and faster every time I heard a droplet of water hit the floor. I couldn't even turn away from what was coming. I knew that I didn't want to see whatever it was, so the only thing I could do was shut my eyes. I screwed them as tightly shut as I could and I pleaded to all the known deities to come and save me in my time of need. Nothing came to save me. Nothing seemed to be able to stop the inevitable. Before the presence I felt in the room with me approached me, I somehow managed to summon the courage to open my eyes. I guess I had a morbid sense of curiosity wash over me. I saw this black mass moving towards me, some kind of hulking dark pitch black shadow. It loomed over me and I shut my eyes and braced. But then before I knew it was morning, I was incredibly relieved to see that there was light in the room now, and I could feel the sensation of movement in my body once again. I got up and made my way to the bathroom. I had to know if what happened last night was the result of an overactive imagination, or a tap left running. I wanted to know if what I experienced was dream or reality. The shower hadn't been dripping and neither had the tap. I smiled to myself, thinking I better stop the boozing or get more sleep, 'cause something clearly ain't right. I turned to go back into my bedroom and then I stepped in something wet. I looked down and saw wet footprints leading all the way up to the side of my bed where, just by my bedside table, the water footprints had formed a kind of pool. It was as if there were footprints leading from the bathroom to my side of the bed and something stayed there. It was a truly chilling sight. I didn't feel like being alone in my flat that night and I was quite a long way from home. So I decided to call a friend of mine who lived in my area and ask if he wanted to spend the night now. This friend of mine was what you might call the spiritual type. He was all about the occult and communicating with spirits and stuff like that. I invited him and he took a look in my bathroom and said something happened in here. He refused to stay the night and insisted that I stay with him at his place. I didn't tell him about the watermarks I had seen in the shape of footprints I had seen on the floor in the morning. I don't know how he could have known the bathroom was giving me bad vibes. Unless it was a heck of a guess, I decided to crash at his house. I went to the letting agent and explained the situation on my next available day off. It was at that point that they admitted to renting me an accident property, a home with a history, so to speak. I didn't know it well at the time, but apparently the rule is if you're going to sell someone a home, you have to explain what went on in that home before they sign the dotted line. I never got that explanation, so through this crazy loophole, I was able to back out of living at that place without losing my deposit. If you're wondering what happened in there, sorry, I was too much of a chicken to ask. I mean, I would be shocked if something didn't happen in the bathroom. One of the reasons I fell in love with the place was because it had a beautiful, deep and wide bathtub, deeper than the usual standard. For sure, I dread to think what might have happened in there. I love reading about experiences and hauntings online, so with the permission of one of my friends, I want to tell you about his apartment, since there has been quite a lot of activity which has happened sporadically over the course of a long period of time. I would do my best to summarize it. I think it started with him hearing voices and shuffling around late at night. He said that the voices and the noises would wake him up. One night when he was feeling extremely restless and he was having difficulties getting back to sleep, he said that he heard a female voice whisper, "What's wrong?" really close to his ear. I don't know about you, but that would terrify me. He, on the other hand, quickly dismissed that phantom voice as an auditory hallucination. Another strange phenomenon he experienced was the toilet flushing by itself in the middle of the night. He got up when he heard that sound because he was first thinking there was a problem that he needed to go and sort out. I don't know, a burst pipe or something. He said that when he went into the bathroom he felt something very gently from above caress his head, like it was some kind of touch of affection. He felt instantly cold and quickly left the bathroom and closed the door. He said that he heard the toilet flush a few more times in the middle of the night, but he never got up to go and check because he didn't want to feel that cold sensation again. I mean, if that was my apartment, I would have contacted the landlord and told them that I was out at that point, yet he somehow continued to live there. Let me tell you something. I've used his bathroom, and when I was in there I've always felt, I don't know if I can RA this the right way, but heavy, like there was something psychologically weighing on me, the atmosphere. Something else. It's oppressive and almost suffocating. I really don't like going in there. After a while, my friend went back to using the bathroom at night and he told me he was certain that it was just a problem with the toilet and he had an overactive imagination. He said that he found long hair collected in his shower drain once. This one's really crazy because he's always so keen to rationalize everything, but he couldn't come up with a logical explanation for this one. My friend shaves his head, and I know for a fact that he is having no ladies over, so that one is crazy. A few years later and he's still living there. He looks a little different. At this point though, he started to grow his hair longer. He was really into metal, still is anyways. One day we bump into one of his neighbors, the guy who lives to the right of him, and this guy is shocked that two dudes were walking out of his apartment. He said something along the lines of, "Oh hello, are you the neighbor? Where's the M?" And we were both confused and told him that there was no Mrs. My friend did not live with a woman. Sorry, it's just, I always hear a woman's voice coming from your side. The neighbor replied. That gave me the chills for real, man. I mean, his hair was growing and it was shoulder length, but I really can't believe that his neighbor could have mistaken him for a girl. If that's where the confusion is, and that's what my friend thinks. It is, to be honest, and there are some other details that my friend probably doesn't want me to put online, so I'll leave a couple of things out. I went to see him recently actually, and I asked him how he was getting on in his spooky apartment, and he said, well, I haven't actually seen anything yet. I've just heard things. I'll probably get out of there if I actually see something. I don't think I could live there after that. I couldn't help but laugh at his bravery. Or perhaps stupidity, depends on your opinion. I mean, to each their own. But our friend circle think that something happened in that apartment and it is definitely haunted, so we advise him to get out. This is quite recent. A friend of mine wanted to move to my area in our city. She asked me if I would help her choose a place and go with her to see the real EST agent. It turned out that the agent that we spoke to was an incredibly chatty guy. He couldn't stop talking, and that was good. I thought I would ask him about haunted properties because I'm really into the scary stuff and I'm always curious about stuff like that. He grinned at me when I asked and said, well, actually I'm told that I shouldn't speak to customers about our homes with histories too much. But he winked at me and then got up and grabbed a thick black folder from the bookcase behind him. I remember the folder's title was something like Information Required on Properties, and I thought that was a clever way to hide the fact that the contents were about accident properties. He flipped through the pages and I saw floor plans, photos, and all sorts whizbee. He said something like ghosts. Well, they can be a little unrealistic in the movies. I'll show you something perhaps a little more interesting. He stopped on a page and we saw an ordinary-looking apartment building. We looked at all the rent fees for the apartments in the buildings and they were about 7,000 yen a month each, all except one apartment, which was almost half the price. I believe that apartment was on the 7th floor. My friend spoke up and asked why that apartment was so much cheaper than all the others. That one was occupied by a student for a while. She had a boyfriend and he was often coming and going. The realtor said, sounds pretty normal to me. I thought to myself, well, our tenant. She got annoyed with her boyfriend coming over so much. She said that he was obsessing over her, developing stalker-like behavior. She had enough. She decided to break it off with him and she dumped him out of the blue. We were listening intently. I was already trying to figure out where this story was heading. The scary thing about it is she didn't know that her boyfriend had secretly made a duplicate of her key. So one night he decided to sneak into her home when she was out. What do you think he did in there? We were silent. We just wanted to hear more. No guesses, her. Well, let me tell you. He tied a rope from her balcony and slipped a noose over his head and jumped. We gasped. Of course the boyfriend didn't make it. My friend said it's so sad he didn't need to die like that, right? And the worst part is, when the girl came home, there was a letter left on her table with her name on it. I got pretty freaked out myself when she told me what the contents of that letter was. We waited on bated breath. The letter read, "Don't worry. I'll be waiting here for you forever." Well, we were amazed by that story, but next he blew us away by showing us photos from the hairdresser dismemberment case. Do you remember that one? It was all too much. We had to get out of there and we didn't much feel like looking at real estate anymore that day. Hi Jay, here the writer says something about a hairdresser dismemberment case. I can try and have a look for that, if there's any interest in taking that one further. Just thought I'd share that with you. Let me know in the comments if you're interested.